Hi everyone. We all know the Blood Ravens from the Dawn of War games, but what many 40k fans don't know is that to this day there is much uncertainty about the origins of the chapter, and that questions have been raised about whether the Blood Ravens could be a successor chapter to a traitor legion, namely the Thousand Sons. The Blood Ravens are a loyalist Space Marine chapter of unknown origins and founding. The origins of the Blood Ravens are shrouded in mystery and are believed to be tied to a dark truth related to the Horus heresy. This elusive chapter has always been drawn to the pursuit of knowledge and the acquisition of ancient lore. It produces an unusually large number of librarians among its ranks, as many neophytes develop psychic abilities soon after their implantation with the Blood Raven's gene seed. The Blood Raven's librarians are unusually powerful and have a role to play in guiding the chapter. The presence of higher numbers of librarians enables them to fight with a precision and calculated fury made possible by their ability to predict and thwart their enemy's strategies and tactics before they come to pass. These arcane powers have led to great speculation about the origin and practices of the Blood Ravens and who their true gene father is. As much as they are known for their bravery and combat efficiency, the Blood Ravens chapter is also renowned for its obsession with recovering lost information and technology. These battle brothers have repeatedly shown a willingness to accept non-traditional techniques and extreme approaches so that some lost relic or tome could be recovered and secured within their vaults. Their tendency to rely heavily upon a higher than normal number of psychically talented Space Marines only serves to further differentiate the Blood Ravens from most other chapters. At the time of the 41st millennium, the Blood Ravens are a fleet-based chapter following the loss of their home planet. Their own records have been expunged, and the ones kept by the Ordo Malleus concerning the chapter are sealed. Perhaps because of this, the Blood Ravens hunger for knowledge and are particularly obsessive about discovering the truth behind their creation. After being cut off from the Imperium at large by the birth of the Great Rift, the Blood Ravens were delivered the gene seed to make their own Primaris Space Marines by Shield Captain Apollos Pertinax of the Adeptus Custodes. The decimation that the Blood Ravens endured as a chapter while being cut off from reinforcement and aid necessitated a rapid induction of these new transhuman Space Marines. The chapter's apothecaries and librarians have researched their Primaris gene seed extensively for any clues as to the Blood Raven's unknown origins. However, what they have discovered remains unknown to outsiders. Though the Blood Ravens have a long and glorious history of service to the Emperor, their exact origins and earliest days in the service of the Imperium are obscured and uncertain. Not even their chapter master or librarians can say with any certainty when the Blood Ravens were founded, or from which of the first founding Space Marine legions the chapter is descended. The chapter's written records in its librarium only go back to the 37th millennium, though vague references of their service in the litanies of other chapters and Imperial Adepta prove that they existed and fought the enemies of the Emperor for many centuries before then. However, the records mentioned are either missing or locked away under an inquisitorial seal. The gaps in the imperial records concerning their origins are so extensive that the chapter does not even know the origins of its gene seed or the identity of their Primarch. The fact that the Blood Raven's own records and chapter lore are lost, along with those kept by the Inquisition on the chapter, is a suspicious indicator that suggests that a concerted effort was made by the Inquisition and even the Blood Ravens themselves to eliminate almost all trace of the Blood Raven's past from Imperial records. Why this erasure was carried out remains unknown, but the event is known as the unfounding by the Blood Ravens. What is odder still is that records on the Blood Ravens were discovered on Alderi worlds hidden in the Eye of Terror, and guarded by the enigmatic Harlequins. Since the Blood Ravens prize the pursuit of knowledge greatly, it is ironic that the Astartes of this chapter know so little about their own origins or the earlier centuries of their service to the Emperor of Mankind. One theory is that the Blood Ravens are actually descended from the traitorous Thousand Sons and their primarch Magnus the Red. Such a connection to a reviled traitor legion would also be a terrible dishonor, and would explain why the Blood Ravens' heritage may have been deliberately obscured from imperial record by the chapter's founding generation of Astartes. The Thousand Sons are one of the traitor legions of Chaos Space Marines who are sworn solely to the service of Tzeentch, the Chaos god of change, intrigue, and sorcery. Though they were once the Imperium of Man's 15th Legion of Space Marines. The main feature that distinguishes the Thousand Sons from the other traitor legions is the sheer number of psychomutations that have always existed amongst the Space Marines in this legion. Almost every member of the legion possesses psychic abilities, and they prefer to use chaos sorcery and guile in combat, relying on their psychic powers and sorcerous knowledge to attain victory. As a result of an ancient spell known as the Rubric of Ahriman, which was cast soon after the Thousand Sons were driven from their homeworld of Prospero during the early days of the Horus heresy, every Thousand Sons Astartes that lacked psychic powers had his soul fused directly into his power armor. The Thousand Sons have become living embodiments of sorcery animated by the power of chaos and the will of the Lord of Change. The Thousand Sons are the sons of Primarch Magnus the Red, whose thirst for knowledge in all its forms led ultimately to damnation and an eternity of servitude to Tzeentch, the Chaos God, also known as the Changer of the Ways. When the Primarchs were scattered throughout the galaxy, Magnus found himself coming to rest upon the distant isolated colony world of Prospero. Prospero's only inhabitants were a population of outcast scholars and mystics who had long since fled the galaxy at large to establish a refuge where they could practice the arts of the psyker. Raised by such scholars, Magnus learned and mastered every one of their arts, soon surpassing them in every regard. The Primarch turned from pupil to master, his fearsomely powerful mind able to manipulate the raw power of the warp in ways no other could. By the time the Emperor located his long-lost son, Magnus was privy to every secret the libraries of Prospero could offer. He yearned to learn more, and in his sire he found the only being with more psychic potential than he had. Accepting command of the Space Marine Legion created using his own gene stock, Magnus took his place in the Great Crusade and utilized his skills for the good of all mankind. Later, at the Council of Nikaea, those who argued against the use of psychic powers stated their case. The Emperor himself held judgment. At length, Magnus came before the council, and gifted as he was with the intellect and charisma of a Primarch, he refuted each of their points. Furthermore, Magnus stated convincingly his belief that no knowledge was in itself forbidden, so long as the scholar used it wisely. Both parties having made their cases, and the judgment appearing to hang in the balance, the Emperor made his decision. The pursuit of psychic powers would be severely limited and strictly controlled, and any incarnation of ritual, superstition, or incantation was to be outlawed entirely. Magnus was furious, for the Emperor's pronouncement severely curtailed his legion's activities, and denied them the use of their most potent weapons of war. And so the Great Crusade continued onwards, but it later became apparent that Magnus had not ceased the pursuit of the forbidden arts at all, but rather had continued it beyond the sight of his peers. On the eve of the War Master Horus's treachery, Magnus had a vision of Horus Lupercal, committing treason against the emperor, and Magnus decided to warn his father of this treachery. Magnus knew that in warning his father of the treachery, he would be admitting that he had disobeyed the edicts of Nikaea, yet he knew he had no choice. Furthermore, he saw that with events unfolding so fast, the only sure way of warning the emperor was to project his consciousness across the void, breaching the psychic defenses of the imperial palace, and to appear before the emperor in spirit form. Magnus issued his warning, but in doing so, he broke the psychic defenses surrounding the throne of terror and also revealed his crime. Immediately, Magnus was condemned. The space wolves were dispatched to Prospero to call the Thousand Sons to account, and they fell upon Prospero as savage barbarians, unleashing their wolf-like anger on the Thousand Sons and all of their works. The silver towers and pyramids of the so-called City of Light, Tizca, were cast down as brother fought brother and savage fought scholar. At the height of the destruction, Rus and Magnus met one another in bitter conflict, and ultimately, Leman Russ proved the stronger of the brother Primarchs. Yet at the very moment of Russ's triumph, Magnus uttered a word of power and caused himself and the City of Light to vanish from the surface of Prospero, disappearing into the warp to reappear later within the depths of the Eye of Terror, on what would come to be known as the Planet of the Sorcerers. The Blood Ravens' dark secret may be that they have descended not from one of the Loyalist first founding chapters, but from the Thousand Sons Traitor Legion, given that before the Thousand Sons homeworld of Prospero was destroyed by the Space Wolves, the Legion had sent out a portion of their forces far from their homeworld in one of their fleets. Thus it was that the Thousand Sons, transported to the Eye of Terror under the deal that their Primarch Magnus the Red made with the Chaos God Siege in order to save their lives in return for service, were not the same as the legionaries found in this fleet. This would mean that the Blood Ravens chapter is not actually a successor chapter, but is technically a remnant of the Thousand Sons who were sent out before the fall of Prospero and before their chapter swore allegiance to Siege. In the book Dawn of War Ascension, it is revealed that the ancestors of the Blood Ravens built a recruiting world on top of an ancient Necron outpost during the Horus Heresy, with the help of the Eldar. The two races worked together, using Eldar sorcery and psychic wards to lock the Necron forces lying beneath the sands into psychic stasis. The Horus Heresy era Space Marines were then tasked with protecting this outpost by the Eldar in order to seal the Necron threat, but they mysteriously abandoned the outpost which they were guarding. The outpost was left unrecorded in Imperial logs until the Blood Ravens rediscovered it many years later. The Eldar mistook the Blood Ravens for being one and the same as the Heresy-era Space Marines, as they too wore similar red power armor, which was also the color of the pre-Heresy Thousand Sons Astartes power armor. In the novel Battle for the Abyss, Imhotep, a Thousand Sons Legion Psyker, whilst fighting the demon Wasoric aboard the starship Wrathful, responded to the demon's question of what did the entities of the warp have to fear from the Emperor, with the response, "Knowledge is power," suggesting a connection to the Blood Ravens who also used this phrase. Since the demon had been manifested in real space for so long, Imhotep was able to destroy its physical form and banish it back to the warp before he died of his many wounds. In the novel A Thousand Sons by Graham McNeill, the remembrancer and psyker Callista Eris has a vision describing a future image of blood and a raven. No more words were forthcoming, and Anku Anan leaned over her, prizing the lids of her eyes open. "Increase the flow of etheric energy," he ordered. "We can get more out of her." "Please," begged Camille. "Don't do this. "Ahriman, she's an innocent, she doesn't deserve this," cried Lemuel. The 1,000 Suns ignored them, and Ammon again adjusted the dials on the machine. The needles dipped even further, and Callista's body jerked on the bed, her legs kicking the covers from her feet. Lemuel didn't want to watch, but couldn't tear his eyes from the dreadful sight. She screamed, and the words poured from her in a flood as the temperature continued to plummet. "It's too late. The wolf is at the door, and it hungers for blood. O throne, no, the blood. The ravens, I see them too. They cry out for salvation and knowledge, but it is denied. A brother betrayed, a brother murdered. The worst mistake for the noblest reason. It cannot happen, but it must." The vision seen by Callista may imply that the blood ravens are descended from the 1,000 Suns gene seed. Callista not only predicted the future destruction of the 1,000 Suns' ancient homeworld of Prospero at the Space Wolves' hands, but she may also have described the eventual formation of the loyalist blood ravens. During her final psychic episode, Callista also screamed out in anguish about the ravens of blood and that they were lost, crying out for their unknown father. In her death throes, she declared that they would be defined by their need to seek knowledge and artifacts of old, which is an important activity often pursued by the blood ravens, particularly in their search to learn more about their own origins. At the same time, one of the 5 arcane cults of librarians that made up the pre-heresy 1,000 Suns Legion was called the Corvidae, the Latin name for ravens and crows, and whose symbol was a black raven's head, thus making it possible that the blood ravens were 1,000 Sons Astartes who mainly belonged to the Corvidae cult. Since the blood ravens are a fleet-based chapter, it is possible that they descended from those Astartes aboard the 1,000 Suns' own armada before they were forced to flee Prospero, which Magnus the Red had ordered to the far ends of the galaxy, so that the Space Wolves could purge Prospero without having to face the 1,000 Suns fleet. The 1,000 Suns Space Marines aboard that armada were thus never transported by the will of Tzeentch through the warp with Magnus and the planet-side Astartes to the planet of sorcerers, as they were far beyond the edge of 1,000 Sun space and were not affected by the internecine fighting. One survivor of the destruction of Prospero was Revuel Arvida, a sergeant of the 4th Fellowship and a member of the Corvidae cult, who managed to survive. Like all Corvidae, Arvida is skilled in the psychic discipline of precognition and the determination of the likely probabilities of future events. Despite his bleak circumstances, Arvida knew, as only a Corvidae could know, that death would not find him on Prospero. The survival of Prospero was no consolation for everything that had been lost, but at least it lent the task of planning his next move a certain urgency. He would survive and live to discover the true causes of his legion's destruction and live to fight them. He is quoted as saying knowledge is power, suggesting another connection to the blood ravens who often use this phrase. Ironically, the symbol of the Corvidae's cult discipline is that of the black raven's head. Arvida would in time go on to become Janus, the first supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knights, and the blood ravens are one of the only chapters in the Imperium that the Grey Knights allow to know of their existence. In the novel Dawn of War Tempest by C.S. Goto, during an incident on the world of Arcadia, a fabled library world of the elusive Harlequins, a blood raven's librarian named Rama suffered amnesia and fell in with the notorious sorceress chaos band, the Brodical Sons, which at that time was led by the sorcerer Azek Ahriman. During his time with the warband, Ahriman refers to the blood raven variously as son of Ahriman, friend of Ahriman, and as a lost brother. Further evidence, which shows a link between the 1,000 Suns and the blood ravens, was when Rama discovers an ancient Eldar tome known as the Unfounding, which mysteriously bears the crest of the blood ravens upon its cover. Ahriman acknowledges that he too once owned a copy of this tome, and that another one was in the possession of Azaria Vidya, chapter master of the Blood Ravens during the 37th millennium. Ahriman states, "I knew Vidya better than you might expect." He also comments to Rama, "We are not so different, you and I. We were not always so different. There was a time, long ago, before the change, when the 1,000 sons of Magnus wore the blood-red armor of their Primarch." Though these clues are certainly interesting, there is no further explanation given as to what many of these statements really mean. Also, it should be noted that Ahriman, as a follower of chaos, is a master of deceit and trickery, who might have been attempting to manipulate Rama to use the Blood Raven's librarian for his own ends. In the unknown year in the 41st millennium, the now infamous sorcerer Azak Ahriman led his Chaos Marine warband known as the Prodigal Sons to the elder Harlequin world of Arcadia to plunder the Arcadian Librarium, one of the most extensive repositories of knowledge in existence. Astartes, under the command of Captain Gabriel Angelos of the Bloodraven Space Marine chapter, alongside a loose alliance of Harlequins, fought against Ahriman and his minions in order to foil their attempts to gain knowledge from the library. Ahriman was attempting to steal certain texts in order to gain access to the webway, but the Harlequins deceived Ahriman about where the entrance of the webway gate led, preventing him from achieving his ultimate goal. If the 1,000 Sons and the Blood Ravens were truly related, isn't it possible that Ahriman, as a master manipulator, would have tried to use this distant connection to somehow manipulate, confuse, or delay the Blood Ravens? The fact that he did not suggests that perhaps no such connection exists. The other problem with the theory that the Blood Ravens are descended from the 1,000 Sons is the fact that the 1,000 Sons are known to suffer from mutations. These mutagenic changes began to be called the flesh change by the legionaries and were much feared, as the spiral of degenerative mutation ultimately reduced a proud 1,000 Sons Astartes into a mindless mutant abomination that would later be recognized by the Imperium as a gibbering chaos spawn. However, the Blood Ravens have no known cases of mutations on the scale and frequency as the flesh change suffered by the 1,000 Sons. Since the Blood Raven's gene seed is not corrupted, this would seem to indicate that the Blood Raven's gene seed originates from another, purer founding chapter than the 1,000 Sons. What do you think? Are the Blood Ravens the descendants of the 1,000 Sons or some other Space Marine chapter? Now that the Blood Ravens have the necessary gene seed to create Primaris Marines, do you think their true origins will be revealed? Leave your comments below, and thanks for watching.